Hello, everyone. This is Shawn1113 with your Shawn1113 Sports Show. Thank you so much for joining me. You can get this episode 3, at any given time on Anchor, FM, Spotify, and whatever this podcast is available. And again, thank you so much for for listening. Sorry about that. Just a brain for a second, but I'm going to do something too. I'm going to give you a story. Given the perilous times that it is today, I'm going to give you a story of a sports story that has to do with politics, and it starts in 1972 in Munich, Germany. The 1972 Olympics in Munich, Germany. There were two guys that did a similar protest to two gentlemen named John Carlos and Tommie Smith, and with Black Power Fist in 1968, at a time, at a very perilous time in 1968, and it was chaos all over the place. It was not just in America, but all over the world then. And I was born in 1968, and I was too young to realize whatever is until later when I began to understand the reasoning behind it. Um, and it was just as chaotic as it is right now in 2020. That's a parallel what I'm referring to. But in between that, in 1972, there were two gentlemen by the name of Vincent Matthews and Wayne Collet on the United States track and field team. And these two were. It is a very forgotten progress. It really is. So with that, let me read the story from the Olympians. That's where the source is. Source I'm coming from. Headline: Vincent Matthews and Wayne Collet, the most casual protest with the most striking consequences. They stood casually, on one barefoot, one hand on hips, the other in thoughtful repose. Right hand stroking chin. You would think they'd been waiting for the bus. But Wayne Collet and Vince Matthews were actually standing on the winners' podium at the 1972 Munich Olympics. And their medals, their silver and gold finishes in the 400-meter sprint around their necks, and the American national anthem playing. Avery Brundage, who was at that time the president of the International Olympic Committee, viewed the behavior of Collet and Matthews as a boring and media banned them from the Olympic Games. This may seem like deja vu to Brundage, as he had made the decision 4 years earlier in Mexico City, when Tommie Smith and John Carlos had separated their medals after the 200-meter finals and raised their black glove fists into the air, reflecting anger at the state of racial relations in America. Very similar to 2020. And there was another guy by the name of Peter Norman, who had a badge, actually. If you don't believe me, look him up. And he was completely ostracized for years and years and years and years in Australia by Australian force. He was pretty much ostracized, Mr. Norman, it's until after he passed away in 2006 that he was finally getting recognized for his right in Australia. Like I said, there were racial tensions everywhere, especially in 1968. Now in 1972, the same thing. There was different circumstances. The same thing was happening. Vietnam War was still going on at that time. Now let's get back to 4 years later, in 1972. The day after Brundage's decision to kick Collet and Matthews out of the Munich Olympic Village, a white bedsheet was suspended from the windows of the American team's dormitory. According to Orlel Cassell in his book, Inside the Five Reading Circus, bedsheet said down with Brundage. Cassell reveals that the person who dropped this flag of protest was Vince Matthews. The head coach of the U.S. track team at the 1972 Olympics was Bill Bowerman, the legendary coach at the University of Oregon. I'm sure some have heard about him. Just let you in world track and field more than I would on that. With Smith, with Smith injured, and Collet and Matthews suspended, he knew he would be able to field a 4x400 relay team. Cleaning the man would have been a near lock of gold if not for the suspensions. According to Kenny Moore's book, Bowerman and the Men of Oregon, Bowerman was upset with the behavior of Collet and Matthews, but he did not believe they deserved to be suspended. Matthews Collet made asses out of himself, as Bowerman would put it, jiving around and talking, giving the impression they didn't want to be ramrods. They didn't want to be ramrods straight. This was unfortunate, but no big deal. I felt they hadn't meant to be disrespectful during the anthem. Jesse Owens talked to them afterward and felt the same. He was arranging to apologize, but before they could, Brundage had Matthews and Collet suspended and sent from the village. You cannot expect the Olympic squad of 60 to have everybody act like Army privates, Bowerman said later. They're great athletes. They're great individuals. The fact that some of them did things that the press objected to didn't bother me too much. Excuse me. They're vivid, alive, human. They're keenly interested. They're competitive, all different. So why not accept that and enjoy it? So Bowerman said he would talk to Brundage the next day and see if an apology might convince Brundage to change his mind. Bowerman did meet with Brundage, and despite the fact that the Palestinian terrorists had just broken the Olympic village, that 1972 also was. They killed 11 Israelis during the Munich Olympics. It was that turbulent. The Palestinians broke into the Israel Olympic Village, and it was a stand-up, and it ended up killing 11 Israelis. And for Brundage, what he did, and he was heavily criticized for this. He wanted the Olympics to go on despite what happened, and he was heavily criticized for that. In the remaining teams as the IOC chairman of the Olympics. Just a side note of that. And they were taking Israeli hostages. Bowerman and Brundage were able to maintain discussion on Collet and Matthews as really the Bowerman's biography. Brundage accepted Bowerman's apology on his behalf, and his athletes accepted a reinstatement that the UOC agreed. Bowerman and his partner in this negotiation, Jesse Owens, rushed to a gallery of USOC members to tell them the wonderful news that Brundage has actually reversed the decision, and that's all they needed was the USOC's endorsement. But Bowerman was surprised to learn that more than the IOC, the USOC was even more outraged. Had already voted to support Brundage's decision to kick Collet and Matthews out of the Olympics. According to Bowerman's borrow, the presiding officer of the USOC, Clifford Buck, gave it as a rationale. Buck said, well, they insulted the American flag. And so Collet and Matthews were suspended, and the heavily favored 4x4 400 relay team never made it to the track. Years later, in 1992, the Los Angeles Times, Collet told the following: I love America. I just don't think it lived up to its promise. I'm not anti-American at all. To suggest otherwise, it's not to stand the struggles of blacks in America at the time. And in many ways, it still is. End of story. The reason I read that, well, you can search the 1911 Olympics on your own. I mean, let me say this again. The 1972 Olympics, protest on your own. Go ahead and research that, and you'll find out there are parallels to today. Different circumstances, same thing, different time. And I just want to remind you there is a story that was there for everybody to hear and everybody to find out for themselves on that. And I hope it did shed some light into that, because they do deserve more than just a footnote of history. Vincent Matthews and Wayne Collet. And I think it parallels today to today's sports. If you think about it, it's like, that last quote by by Collet. Wayne Collet tells you all, didn't it? Tells you more than I would ever say. So for me, like I said, in these changing times, in these unfortunate times that truthfully, I'm thinking there's some kind of metamorphosis going on at the same time that, that things are changing. They're changing by some kind of metamorphosis. I don't know what it's going to be like for sports. Today, you look like, as we're going back to live sports, it's like there's a metamorphosis there too. It can't be the same with COVID-19, the protests and riots, and all the other things. The kneeling, it's just all kinds of stuff right now. I don't even know what to say next. Let's see what happens. But I'm going to leave you with one final quote. And the quote goes like this: the most important thing is to try and inspire people so they can be great in whatever they want to do. And the person's name who made that quote was Kobe Bryant. Need I say more? Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.